Jim Carrey, the man who made the world laugh while breaking inside. There's a strange kind of silence that lives behind Jim Carrey's smile. A quiet that most people never noticed. Because for decades, he wasn't just an actor, he was the man the world depended on when life felt too heavy. When people were hurting, they turned to Jim. When the world felt dark, he made it brighter. When laughter felt impossible, he made it uncontrollable. But behind the elastic face, the explosive energy, and the unstoppable charisma, was a man fighting a battle almost no one saw. And the deeper you look into Jim Carrey's life, the more his laughter feels less like joy, and more like armor. A childhood built on survival. Jim Carrey wasn't born into comfort. He came into the world on January 17, 1962, in Newmarket, Ontario, the youngest child in a family that was quietly falling apart. His mother, Kathleen, suffered from severe chronic illness. She spent long periods in bed, sick and weakened, and young Jim felt helpless watching her suffer. So, like many children do when they don't know how to fix pain, he tried to distract it. He made faces. He pulled silly expressions in mirrors. He turned himself into a human cartoon just to make her smile. His father, Percy, had his own quiet tragedy. He was a talented jazz saxophonist who had dreamed of performing on grand stages. But fear pushed him toward practicality. He gave up music and became an accountant. Then even that safe life collapsed. Percy lost his job, and the family's foundation crumbled. Money disappeared. Stability vanished. Pride shattered. And slowly, they lost their home. Not in a dramatic Hollywood way, but in the slow, humiliating way that breaks families quietly. They lived in a Volkswagen van in a relative's driveway. They slept in tents by Lake Ontario. And teenage Jim worked grueling night shifts as a janitor and security guard at a tire factory just to help his family survive. At only 16 years old, he quit school completely. Behind the silly voices and wild energy was just a terrified kid, scared of ending up like his father, talented, but trapped. Jim later said watching his father give up his dreams changed him forever. Because Percy chose security and still lost everything. That's when Jim learned a brutal truth. You can fail at the safe path. So you might as well chase what you love. But his hunger didn't come from ambition. It came from fear. Fear of being invisible. Fear of being powerless. Fear of never being enough. The road of rejection. Jim Carrey's journey didn't start with applause. It started with rejection. At just 10 years old, he mailed his resume to the Carol Burnett Show, convinced talent alone would open the door. They sent back a standard rejection letter. Most kids would have stopped dreaming. Jim held on to it as motivation. At 15, he stepped on stage for his first stand-up performance wearing a suit picked by his mother. The crowd hated it. They booed him. They laughed at him, not with him. He left that stage humiliated and crushed. And for a while, he almost quit. But comedy was the only thing that gave his life meaning. So he forced himself back. Years passed in desperation and grind. He performed in tiny clubs. Bombed again. And again. He auditioned for Saturday Night Live 3 times. Rejected every time. Once, he wasn't even allowed to perform for Lorne Michaels. In 1981, he opened for a rock band and got booed off stage so badly that he sat alone afterward questioning whether he was delusional. But tiny sparks appeared. A local newspaper called him a rising star. He gained attention in Toronto comedy clubs. Rodney Dangerfield noticed him. Every step forward came with crushing loneliness. He obsessed over comedy. Studied other performers. Criticized himself endlessly. By 1983, he risked everything and moved to Hollywood. But Los Angeles wasn't welcoming. They called him too weird, too wild, too much. And for a man who had lived in a van, that rejection cut deeper than people knew. Stardom that came with pain. Everything changed between 1990 and 1994. In living color gave him a platform, and suddenly the very traits people had rejected became celebrated. Then came one of the most legendary years any actor has ever had. 1994. Ace Ventura. The Mask. Dumb and Dumber. 3 massive hits. 3 global successes. The world now worshipped the man who had once been booed off stage. He became the first actor in history to earn $20 million for a single film. For most people, this would be heaven. For Jim, it was grief. In the middle of all that triumph, he buried both parents. His mother died in 1991. His father died in 1994, the same year he became a superstar. He once placed a $10 million check in his father's casket, a symbolic promise he had written years earlier when he was broke. But money didn't fill the silence. His marriages collapsed. Melissa Woolmore ended. Lauren Holly lasted less than a year. Fame didn't save him. It isolated him. Love, loss, and the darkness that followed. By the 2000s, Jim Carrey was no longer just funny, he was respected. The Truman Show. Man on the Moon. Eternal sunshine of the spotless mind. But inside, he was still fractured. Relationships came and went. Renee Zellweger. January Jones. Jenny McCarthy. He was described as tender one moment and completely unreachable the next. Depression followed him for decades. He used antidepressants for years, then quit, saying he didn't want numbness, he wanted truth. Then came the relationship that changed everything. Catheriona White. They loved hard. Fought hard. Broke apart. Came back together. In 2015, she was found dead from a toxic mix of prescription drugs. Jim carried her coffin through the Irish rain. But the grief was followed by scandal. Lawsuits. Leaked texts. Accusations. Even when the case was dismissed, his spirit wasn't. He disappeared from Hollywood. The vanishing of Jim Carrey. After that tragedy, he didn't feel like a star anymore. He felt broken. He turned to painting. Dark, emotional, raw art. He sold his mansion. Lived quietly. He stopped numbing himself. Stopped drinking. Stopped hiding. He wrote a strange, honest book about fame and pain. He returned briefly with Sonic the Hedgehog, not as a comeback, but as a test of himself. Then in 2022, he said, "I've done enough." And the world realized something heartbreaking. The man who made everyone laugh for decades had been fighting just to survive. Final thought for video ending. Jim Carrey isn't just a comedian. He's a survivor. Behind every wild face was a scared child. Behind every laugh, a wound. Behind every success, a silent battle. And maybe that's why his comedy meant so much. Because it wasn't fake happiness.